Hello and welcome to this Tribe365 webinar. Are you ready for the Great Resignation? I'm Rory ffoulkes from digital marketing agency Chetaru, and I'll be the facilitator for what should be a lively and highly engaging discussion on one of the world's hottest people or HR topics. Just a bit of housekeeping to start with. This webinar is being streamed live on LinkedIn and recorded, and we'll be sharing recording with you and our audiences at a later date. Want to stick to an hour or less for this webinar. So if you have any questions, please feel free to ask them in the chat messaging facility, and we'll try to answer them in the final 10 to 15 minutes. Without further ado, I'm going to ask our panelists to introduce themselves. Can I start with you, Dan, please?
Yeah, hello everyone, my name is Dan Webber. I work for an organisation called Tribe365. And basically our organisation looks at cultures and behaviours in organisations. Previously I worked in the NHS on lots of projects around risk and patient safety. And obviously this is a great topic for us, real passion of ours to look at what's happening in the Great Resignation and its effect on people.
Brilliant, thank you. Kelly?
Yeah, certainly. Hi everyone, my name's Kelly Thomas and I work as HR manager here at ATM Limited. We are a vegetation management, fencing and landscaping and ecology contractor, and we're based throughout the UK with depots in Boroughbridge, Weston-super-Mare and Daventry. I've worked in HR for about 5 years now, and I'm continuing my further development with additional HR courses, because as I'm sure you'll appreciate with HR, it's a never-ending feast. There's employment law coming in all the time, so trying to keep on top of that is just a never-ending opportunity, let's say, for me. We are struggling ourselves with this Great Resignation, so absolutely happy to be here today to share some thoughts on that.
Fantastic, great to have you with us. And now, Oliver, please.
Beautiful. Thank you, Rory. I describe myself as a cultural doctor. I've been looking at culture and trying to work out exactly what's needed and required to really bring environments into the best spaces possible. I work with Tribe365 and I've been doing that the last while. And if I talk too much, you'll get very bored, so I'll shut up now.
Right, great, thank you very much indeed. So let's get underway. Dan, could I ask you to give a definition of the Great Resignation and tell us why it's such a hot topic?
Yeah, so the Great Resignation is a term that's been applied to basically a drove of people leaving jobs over the course of the pandemic, but then kind of following on at the end of the pandemic. So after the lockdowns and the restrictions were lifted, there was still a lot of people leaving the roles. Up until Q4 in 2021, where it was estimated 1.2 million vacancies in employment. This has largely hit certain areas, but a lot of areas. So main industries that have been hit are healthcare. So you can understand that the pandemic had a massive effect on healthcare workers. So there was a lot of shift within that, and retail and hospitality, who were also hit quite hard in the pandemic where things were closed down. I think at first it may have had the furlough might have had an effect on things where people were kind of shuffling around different jobs because things were closed, and obviously people had to get work in different areas. But then once that continued, when studies were done and they were looking at why the reasons people were leaving, a lot of the reasons were down to finance, work-life balance, and people were just feeling like they were in a good place to move on from the different roles. As I was doing some research before, PricewaterhouseCoopers have just done some research on this, which has been published recently. And they've done a study on 2,000 people, just kind of getting the feeling of how this is going to continue or where they think it's going to go in the future. And out of those 2,000 people, roughly 1 in 5 people said they were looking to move on in the next year. So, you know, that range for I'm definitely going to move on to I'm really looking to move on. So 1 in 5 people. And if you think that, I mean, obviously it was 2,000 people that they surveyed, but if you do that across the kind of workforce, that's an estimated sort of 10 million people who potentially could be moving roles this year. So that's it in a nutshell. I think I've covered all the bases. If anyone's got anything to add, I'd love to hear it, but I think that's probably what the phenomenon is called, the Great Resignation. Yeah.
Okay, fantastic. So a question for the panel as a whole. Why is this happening?
Good question. If we knew, we could have mitigated it, I'm sure. From what we've seen, so I'm in the construction industry, so although we have been affected, we haven't been affected so much as the other industries, such as the healthcare, the hospitality, and that sort of thing. I think I've read recently that 41% of people are likely to be considering moving jobs in the next year, which backs up your statement, Dan. So sat here in the office now, if you look around you, nearly half of the workforce are going to be looking for alternative employment, which is quite scary, really, because if you think of that from a business point of view, where does that put your growth plans, your customers, and your bottom line? I guess from my point of view, coming out of COVID, we were getting excited at the prospect of getting back to some sort of normality. And actually, we've not seen that with the, with the Great Resignation now kicking in. We're actually in a worse place now than we perhaps were 12 to 18 months ago, when we actually had a steady flow of recruitment. And if we did have resignations, we could easily fill those roles, whereas at the moment, we've had vacancies open for a number of months and we really are struggling to fill them. Some themes that have come out from us, and I don't know if you guys support this with what you're seeing, is obviously people are financially motivated. So you will see companies out there who are throwing massive amount of money at candidates to come on board. And for me, if you want your business to be profitable, it's not a sustainable approach. You can't continue with that forever. So I think those people and those companies who are throwing big lots of money at candidates at the moment, give them maybe 12, 18, 24 months, and they're gonna have problems. I think we are then going to see perhaps not the great redundancy, but I think companies are going to have to then start looking at the structure and scaling back what they've been implementing over the last 12 to 18 months. What I think we're also seeing with the COVID effect is people have been at home for 12 to 18 months, if not longer, saving money. So they've not been going out, they've not been spending money on fuel, getting to and from work, they've not been socialising. So they now have this pot of money that we're looking at. And if they're not happy in their role, they have two options. Do they just jump ship with that pot of money and can dip into it until they find a role that maybe suits them? Or do they take a leap of faith on a career choice, a change of path that they may not have had the confidence to have done in the past, but now they have that savings pot, they feel empowered to do that. So I think those people who are financially motivated have all of the power at the moment, and they do have lots of opportunities that they may not necessarily have had pre-pandemic. Another thing that we're seeing at the moment is this hybrid remote working. We have many vacancies and the candidates are demanding, and I don't say that lightly, they literally will demand to work from home. And if we say, I'm sorry, this isn't a role that can work from home, they then are just not interested. I think technology has kind of blurred the lines between a work-life balance and it's causing a kind of burnout and exhaustion as well. So whereas people are demanding to be working from home, we have to be very mindful of that, because that does cause an issue where I think Microsoft Teams, or Microsoft did a bit of analysis, and I think it was 40% of chats within Microsoft Teams are classed as being sent out of hours, and people are responding much quicker than they necessarily would. So I think people are now responding within 5 minutes of a chat being sent. So if you think people can demand to work from home, but for me that has a negative impact on perhaps your mental well-being and actually your work-life balance, because you do feel that pressure of, I need to respond to that email straight away. But we are seeing people demanding that balance because they've had that for the last 2 years, and they now can't even picture themselves going into an office full time. It's just not something they're wanting to see.
And it's interesting you say that, Kelly, and sorry if I'm interrupted. Tell me to shut up immediately if you wanted to carry on.
No, not at all.
It's funny you should say that. I was chatting to basically a leader within an Indian company the other day, and he described a situation which effectively was someone who didn't want to come back and wouldn't come back into the office, and because they knew that's what the organization really wanted to push, because there was real benefit and that there was a real business need for that. They ended up getting a job somewhere else. And he followed up by saying that effectively they required them to work in the office, and they did that very quickly. So there was this sudden, I'm maintaining this position here, and then I'm not over there, which was interesting. And I think what I'd suggest we may have all experienced during COVID lockdowns was that we were forced into a position where we were prioritizing ourselves. We suddenly became the all important. You know, it was about maintaining health and health in others, and that was a complete change in model, wasn't it? You know, when you think where historically have we all been with work? Well, you go and make money, you go and work, you do as you're told. And we know we've been transitioning away from the simplicity of what I've just said there, but effectively people would probably say, oh yeah, when I'm at work, I'm making money, that's what I'm there to do. But then suddenly you've had this period of about 2 years where everyone's been told, oh, you're important. And little by little, they've been prioritizing those things and sort of going, actually, I am important and I need to look after myself. And that is the most important thing. And starting to make clearer decisions about what's important to them. So you've just turned the model upside down. And whilst organizations probably have all been moving towards a direction where we do prioritize people more, it's just pushed people into almost, no, I'm not doing anything unless in this environment, I'm not doing anything unless it's right for me, and almost taking shots. And then when they suddenly get that other side, which is actually money is important, then they fall back into line and they're like, oh, I better do this. And does that make sense to anyone else? So that's sort of what I've been watching.
Yeah, I think Kelly said, it does. Sorry, Kelly, go on.
No, you go, Dan.
You said something in there, Kelly, where you talked about well-being. And I was reading something before where there was a term that was used, which is employees were enduring work rather than enjoying it. And I think maybe, like Oliver said, where people have had that focus on themselves, you know, they hadn't been, you know, doing 60-hour weeks or killing themselves at work. And they had that little bit, almost like a sort of mini retirement where they're at home and they've got a little bit more space to, you know, go in the garden and sit in the sun and just have that little bit more time to themselves, which they probably didn't get. That people have kind of reassessed and gone, well, actually, you know, I've got to be working for quite a long time. Finance is always going to be a focus, of course, but then maybe there's something in this where I can, or, you know, I'm doing a job I don't particularly enjoy, I'm not passionate about anymore. Maybe it's time just to move on, because that doesn't feel as scary anymore. Because I know that I can leave my job, find another job, and it might be an industry that I absolutely love. It's funny what you said there, Kelly, about you know, the organizations maybe having to pay more to attract people. And I think you're absolutely right. I think that will happen now and probably for the next few months, but at some point the dust will settle on that, I think. And I think there will be a massive adoption period where organizations have gone, well, we're paying the money to get people in because that's how we've managed to recruit people. But then we can't necessarily afford to keep doing that. So it's going to be interesting to see how that balances out. Because I think, you know, it's all very well people demanding to work from home. And if, you know, if organizations can do that, and it's great, and that's what makes people happy. And, you know, there is something about well-being where people don't have to travel into work and save money on costs or whatever. But you're absolutely right again. I think working from home at some point will start to have potentially an effect on people as well. So all of these things are going to come into line at some point, maybe a little bit down the road, maybe sort of in the next few months. But there's certainly things I think people have got, organizations and individuals have got to probably consider. And I'm hoping that's what we can kind of chat about here and just give some people some ideas or get some queries and thoughts on what that might look like in different industries.
I can just move things on slightly, but I think it's a continuation. Do we think this is a generational issue? I think I'm 40 now, I know I don't look much older. But when I first entered the world of work, I was told if you didn't stick with a job for 2 years, you basically sullied your CV. That was studying that's sort of set into probably the generation before us, and for time immemorial. But I think now perhaps there's an attitude among younger people where that just isn't a concern for them anymore. They don't mind hopping from job to job. It's something they can do. If not happy, they can move on. Is that something in that?
Potentially, yeah. I've got a little story about that. So I'm a similar age to you, Rory, and so some of my friends have got sort of kids who are starting the world of work now, sort of 16, 17, around that age. And a friend of mine, his daughter got a job at a fast food place, and she came in after a couple of weeks and said, "Oh, I don't want to work there anymore. I hate it." And his kind of take on it was, "Well, you have to work there. You've got a job there. You can't just leave and go to another job." And she was like, "Well, why not? I don't like it. Why should I have to endure something I don't like?" And I think the clash of generations there was, well, you've got a job, you have to do it. Almost as if, how will you understand what you do like unless you've gone through what you hate? Whereas, I mean, his daughter, I'm not saying that generation in total, but his daughter kind of just didn't understand and accept that. Like, well, I'm not doing it, I don't like it. So maybe there's something in that where there is, people see, obviously we don't want to kind of overgeneralize on generations, but there is a thing in generations where some people see jobs as being important, and you have to make sure that you have loyalty and stick with it. Whereas maybe the generation coming up now are kind of like, well, if I don't like it, I'm not going to do it.
Absolutely. I think what we've seen is millennials seem more likely to make career decisions based on achieving a good work-life balance. Do they get the weekends off? Do they get the nights off? Can they still do their hobbies and whatnot that they're wanting to still continue with, rather than out of fear of financial hardship? And I think we're seeing millennials at the moment seem to appreciate that financial security is nothing without good health and well-being and relationships. And I think I agree, they're more willing to job hop to try and secure that flexibility and work-life balance. And if something doesn't suit them at this moment in time, try something else.
Yeah.
And, reviewing CVs as we are at the moment, you do see a lot more of the millennial age, and I'm within that age myself, but I'm more of an old head. I think I was brought up to stick things out, try your hardest, do your best. I think, without wanting to offend anybody, some millennials are more flaky, if that's that's the appropriate word. They try something, give it a try, and jump across if it doesn't suit them. I don't think they've got as much gusto just to stick it out and give it a try. And I totally agree with you, Dan. How do you know what you like until you try something you don't? As a parent, I've got my kids telling me they don't like something without even trying it. And I'm forever telling them, you've got to try it first. And it's the same with jobs. Stick something out and you're not going to know if you like a job within the first week. It does take time to embed into a team and into an organization. And I just think they don't have that loyal approach that you spoke of, unfortunately.
But that's interesting you say that, Kelly, because I think this is a pattern that has been identified for a lot longer than just the Great Resignation. And what we've potentially seen within the Great Resignation is this sort of, as we said, an adjustment of priorities, prioritizing yourself over just having a job. And that's something that's been explored by the sounds of it internationally, right now. And I think the millennial challenge that was probably identified, 2015, you heard a lot of noise, didn't you? Going back 7 years, you heard a lot of noise around that. And it is definitely something that's still been, let's say, explored and navigated by organizations. And a lot of it probably comes down to that because where I stand on this is probably just thinking all that's happened is everyone's been shoved now into a space where there is more exploration around what does this actually mean to me? Why should I stick it out? What is it about this space? How much do I buy into this? And I think that's what we've got now internationally is less of a gap between the way millennials have been seen to think and, let's say, older generations. I think it's just been closed now. I think much closer, people are starting to prioritize themselves. And that's where I'd have suggested millennials have always been. They've been exposed to so much more than any of us have through growing up, everything that exists on the internet, seeing that there are so many options out there. You don't just get on with what's in front of you. You can be a YouTuber. You can do anything. You're led to believe more in this society that it's all about the energy you have within yourself and where you drive that. So I think there's a lot of questioning that potentially has always gone with that. And the more you create environments that, truly represent something underlying that people need to buy into, and you're achieving great things, because let's face it, anyone who has an organization, whatever you create, whatever you do, you are doing something amazing, aren't you? Because otherwise no one would buy into it. So no matter what, we all do amazing things. You've heard of that old anecdote of going around NASA and then talking to the person sweeping up, and they say, well, I helped build space rockets. It's that inner belief that you're contributing to something so much greater. And that's where potentially organizations need to catch up with to really, adjust to this period, because a bit like the digital revolution we saw during COVID, where everyone's suddenly very comfortable doing online everything. That had been something we'd all explored as organizations for so much longer and struggled to convince, oh yes, digital is important. But I think likewise, we're also seeing the sudden importance of understanding truly what it is companies do or why they do it, and starting to really get to grips with that culturally. And I don't want to use the word culture, but it's inevitable, isn't it? I think it's just getting people to buy into what you do in the first place, and that should make a big difference, shouldn't it?
You would hope so, but I also think we might have something to learn from the millennials. Why shouldn't we put ourselves first? Why shouldn't we demand a good work-life balance? And I'm my own worst enemy. I am the person who has the laptop on the kitchen table, and every time I walk past, I check if an email's there. But actually, should I not be closing my laptop and go, no, this is family time? So actually, I do think, although we may be giving millennials a bit of a hard stick at the moment, we have a lot to learn from them, I think.
Absolutely.
And I think the key to that is balance, isn't it? So I think, we're talking about, having a good work-life balance, and, there is a time to work, and then there is a time to kind of, like you say, Kelly, shut your laptop and focus on your family or friends or whatever that is. That helps you just kind of reset for work. And I think that's important for work, because you cannot be your best version of yourself if you're constantly stressed, or, you're doing maybe 12-hour days constantly, and you're just feeling that you're just in one mode all the time. So you're absolutely right. I think learning from different generations and different industries and experiences is vital to this, and I think that'll really help other organizations when they're looking at what they're going to do next to kind of either accommodate this or just mitigate against the risk of the Great Resignation.
Okay, that's great stuff. So what barriers do organizations face when trying to face tackle the challenge of the Great Resignation?
Well, I think the biggest barrier is just to kind of continue and do nothing, and maybe just bury their head in the sand a little bit. I think from a culture point of view, there's a lot to be learned from this. And maybe, where in the past organizations were looking for the ideal candidate, and they kind of set the boundaries for that. So this is the person that we want to work here, and this is what they'll do, and this is how they'll do it. Maybe there's something in, as we've already explored, that people are kind of thinking about themselves a little bit more. So maybe there's something within organizations where they have to kind of acknowledge that, and trying to get sort of people who, fit that mold perfectly and come in and do the 9 to 5, and then they go home and they're not really too concerned about what happens in between and after during work. Maybe that's something that organizations need to consider. Maybe it's just something looking at well-being of staff and how they measure that. I think that's really important. I think measuring anything's really important. They'll measure finance, they'll measure performance, and maybe it's time to just measure how happy your employees are and how that culture works within an organization. And like Oliver said before, I think it's really important that people have that passion and understand why they're there and what they're doing and why they're trying to achieve great things as well.
Yeah, Kelly, did you, I don't want to talk now because as you can see, I always go on.
Yeah, I just think one of our main barriers is the point I raised earlier about this financial monetary situation where we are just finding I think in the first 5 months of the year at ATM, 20% of the people we have offered a job to have used it as a springboard to remain in their current job. So that is a massive barrier for us. And I think a colleague of mine gave me a stat that people want to leave work for a reason. You know, if you are looking for another job, there is a core root to that reason. And if that business then throws more money at you to stay, perhaps a counter offer for an offer you've achieved elsewhere, there's a stat that within 6 months, you will then be looking for another job again, because there's a reason that you weren't happy, and money generally doesn't resolve that. It may temporarily, but in the longer term, whatever the working hours, the environment, whatever it might be, is still going to be there, and that's not going to change. So I think that is a massive barrier at the moment, and something that it's difficult to kind of rectify. Something we're trying to do is, rather than trying to compete with the big guns with the money, we're wanting to get apprentices into the business and younger people, training them. You know, we're passionate about training and developing our staff, and if we do that, you know, the younger generation will remain loyal with us, will stay within the business, and will grow and develop. And that's not going to be a short-term plan. We are in it for the long game with them, but we see that as a way to crush the barriers that we've got, because we aren't willing to turn our business into negative profit or anything like that, because we want to be, we've been here 43 years and we want to be here for another 43 years. But competing with the big guys who are throwing cash, it's just, that's not going to work for us. So we do see the future as being get the people in, not necessarily young, just perhaps untrained or not trained within our industry, and then putting them on a training plan to train them to where they need to be for us.
Yeah, and I'm thrilled you've said exactly what you've said there, Kelly, because when Rory asked the question, my initial response was just, it's vast. This space is vast. You know, trying to get to the right place, to get this right for teams, individuals going forward, it's vast, and it's huge amounts of change organizationally, you know, priorities, etc. But just chucking money at it and trying to do a scattergun approach of just, okay, well, we'll go down to a 4-day working week, or we'll have, you know, loads of benefits to try and make it. It's just, you're just chucking things out there that may or may not work, and you may just end up losing more money, and that's not going to work. And I think what we've been doing as a team, and you know, I almost shudder when I start talking about any of the work we do, because I don't want it to be a promotional exercise. But I'd like people to explore it and, you know, pull it apart and say, well, is this the right way? You know, over the years, what we've been doing is really understanding what the components of creating healthy teams is. And it comes down to 4 areas. Passion, you know, people truly believe in what they're doing. Structure, making sure that everyone agrees with the way forward. Balance, making sure that people are responsible for understanding what their balance is. Not everyone wants to work 9 to 5. Some people want to work a lot longer. Some people want to work a lot less because they've got childcare, etc. So, you know, and then the 4th area is honesty. And would I attack all of those at once for an organization? No, because there's too many challenges we all face on a day-to-day basis. So bringing in anything really quickly and just going, oh, okay, we're going to get this right, it'd be too difficult. And too much disruption. And I'd say only organizations who are literally going down the pan should do that. You know, pull yourselves back and really just go for it, because you're pretty much going for broke anyway. So just get on and do it. But I think if you're an organization that's in a good enough space, things are working, but you are seeing the challenges that everyone's seeing at the moment, I'd say the first area you focus on is starting a drive for honesty, starting a drive for an organization, starting to have honest conversations around what people's needs, wants are. and starting to work out what that looks and feels like as an organization, and only focus there initially, because the challenges of trying to get this right too quickly, you're fighting against all habits, etc., in the past. And I think if you just sort of go in there and go, sort of, oh, okay, this is exactly where we need to be, it's not going to happen. It'll break sooner, and it will break people around sooner than it actually works. So being really gentle with this, because like we said, all we've done during COVID is we changed people's priorities. But I'd say they're unrealistic. So people, yes, they've switched completely to the other side, where they are just prioritizing themselves and forgetting that we've all got organizations that need to grow, need to deliver, and there are right ways to do that. And people are sort of thinking, well, I don't have to comply with that. I should be looking after me, but there's a balance. And I think, yeah, the challenges are so many, but actually, if you take almost that approach that we all know in ourselves, is probably the first place to start, which is, let's just start talking about the things that are working in our, let's just start those conversations on a daily basis. Let's just make sure everyone remembers how important they are as individuals, and that they are prioritized in this environment, and that it can only take a small conversation or a look from a manager to suddenly make you feel like you're insignificant. But actually, no, you're still important, and keep on having that reset every day. Then I think that to me sounds a realistic maybe pathway. I don't know.
Yeah.
The challenges, as you asked there, Rory, for me, are vast, because you're taking organizations that are historically built, I'm afraid, in the sort of command and control type environments, not because they're bad or anything, but because that's the way we've evolved as cultures, as people. We're much more used to having set bits of work set in front of us and just go. Yes, millennial generations are less used to that, and they're looking for more. But can you just turn a key and suddenly get it to the right place? No, you're fighting against too much behind you. You've got to respect that,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, got a question that sort of follows that slightly. If companies acknowledge that, no, not at all. I think you probably carry on from there, actually, Oliver. If companies do acknowledge that they are threatened by the Great Resignation, what can they actually do, tangibly do?
As a people professional, I think my core aim is to foster a culture of care. If your employees feel cared about, and they'll be more committed, more engaged, have lower stress, and hopefully better well-being. So, I see it certainly as my role that, yes, I'm trying to, we do all the business reports and we do everything that we do to keep the business going, but checking in with our staff, as you said, Oliver, just touching base with people and understanding what it is they want, what do they want to achieve, are they happy, is there any blockers to their happiness? And that's more of my goal. I've recently had my PDR with my line manager, and my sole priority is looking after our staff, and whatever I can do to help them is top priority of what I should be doing every day.
It's sorry, Dan.
So I was just going to add to that, really. I think that's great, Kelly, from certainly from an HR point of view, hearing that is great that you've got that culture of care. But I think one of the things that maybe this starts with, Rory, just to answer that question, is, obviously you want to keep the staff, the good staff, the great staff that you've already got, who really believe and passionate about working there. But maybe from a recruitment point of view, maybe start thinking about that. So maybe identifying what behaviors your organization really wants to be seen as. So what behaviors really stand out for your organization? To work in this organization means this, and have that passion in the organization already. And then when you recruit into that, it's going to be a lot easier to kind of find the right people. I think one of the traditional questions in an interview is, why do you want to work here? And it's a bit of a tricky question, that, if you ever asked it in an interview, isn't it? Because maybe, how do you answer it? Are you honest? Like, well, I like the money. Do you go away and do some research and kind of come up with things yourself? But maybe a better way of doing that is just to kind of say, this is what it means to work here. How do you feel about that? And then people are kind of, you know, being exposed straight away to the behaviors that the organizations really want them to get behind and be passionate about. So I think keeping people, yes, definitely. And I would kind of just promote what Kelly had said about having that caring culture and make sure that everyone's all right all the time. But start thinking about how you recruit and how you retain staff. And maybe it's a bit too late on exit interview to find out why people are leaving. You know, it's data that you can use, but maybe try and keep finding out the sticking points from people's day one. So, you know, as soon as someone starts, really promote them saying what's frustrating them, what's potentially causing the well-being to diminish, or just all the little things, because they will add up. And eventually people do kind of leave because of those little things haven't been addressed. There's the big things as well, obviously, but I think a lot of people endure the little things over time and then they just think, oh, I've had enough. And we know now that that's probably going to be the breaking point for a lot of people who will just move on, where they might have endured it a little bit more.
Yeah.
Yeah. And also fully agree, Dan. But the other thing what intrigued me was when Kelly was talking about, you know, trying to do what's in the best interests for the teams around you. That's quite a difficult thing to do well, isn't it, Kelly?
It is. It is. We often, you know, I'm very, very lucky at where I work that I've got a director and a boss who equally puts the care of the staff as his foremost. He's not, of course, he's worried about the bottom line, but he has a finance director to deal with that. He doesn't need to deal with it. So he is a very personable person who, as I do, wants to put the employees' care and well-being first. So we've pushed over the last 2 years, probably even throughout COVID, mental health first aiders and counselling service for staff, and just trying to do everything we can to make them feel appreciated and, you know, part of the team. But if they don't, what can we do to support them? And I think it's really, really tricky. Because at the back of your mind, of course, you need to watch costs and make sure you don't want to, you know, lose your profit and whatnot. And we've spoken, Oliver, with Tribe365 on how do we, you know, the apps that you have to monitor staff's well-being and, you know, checking in every day or every couple of hours on how they're feeling. Because we have a lot of remote staff, you know, we have 83 staff here. There's probably only 15 at the depot I work at. So how do I know everybody else in the business? How are they feeling? You know, how do I know if they're considering leaving the job or that they're not happy? So, you know, I know we've not developed it as much as I would have liked, but that is still something we're looking at, and we'll look at with Tribe365 on little things we can do that. That's not a pitch for the business, I promise, but it is an easier way to kind of understand, because I'm not going to get to see 70 odd people when they're based throughout the country. So we need to find ways to check in with our staff and make sure they are happy and feel appreciated, because as you said, in exit interviews it's probably too late, and the amount of exit interviews I sit through that it's, oh, I've suggested this to my line manager but it didn't get it, nothing happened about it. And if they don't feel listened to, then they lose the motivation, they lose the team spirit, and it's a massive knock-on effect. So we do need to, you know, get them from the recruitment stage, make sure they feel appreciated, make sure they feel listened to. Do they have any ideas on how we can improve within the business? And then that goes throughout the business, you know, every single day, not just waiting for your yearly PDR or whatever it might be as well.
Yeah, I think one of the things to add to that as well is maybe just have the conversation in teams about what the understanding of well-being is. We were discussing this in the Tribe office yesterday, and generally I think people have an understanding of well-being, sort of physical and mental health. But I think it's really important to establish that in your teams and your organization so people fully understand what is meant by well-being. So is it when they've got to the stage where, oh, I can't come in anymore, I'm not well? Or is it that beginning, I'm starting to feel a little bit under pressure or whatever? And just establish what that means, because I think holistic well-being starts right at the beginning, doesn't it? Where people are starting to feel a little bit off, not right. And that's when you should be promoting them to come forward and say, look, this is, I'm feeling a little bit off or frustrated. So it doesn't get to the point where, you know, you've got to sort of have mental health experts or physical health experts come in. So just establishing what well-being means within the organization, I would advise on doing that. And it sounds a little bit, well, it's well-being, isn't it? But I think if everyone understands exactly what is meant by that, it gives you a lot better footing, so people feel like they're part of that process as well.
Yeah. We do, and obviously I work in the construction industry, male dominated, and there's a massive stigma on talking about your health and your well-being. Yeah. And you know, they might tell you if they've hurt the foot and it, you know, oh, they're limping a bit and that's hurting, but actually how many, and I'm going to say men because that is predominantly the environment I work in, how many men would actually sit down and go, actually I'm feeling a bit off today? And we've got to break down those barriers and try and encourage people to talk. And it doesn't have to be about work-related issues. Are you worried about the cost of living crisis? Are you worried about your partner at home? It can be absolutely anything. But if you bring that into work, and it's affecting your work, we want to find a way of helping and supporting you with that. So I think there's a massive project that everybody's got to get through to actually, it's okay to talk. It's not, you're not demasculating yourself or anything if you put your hand up and go, actually, I'm struggling here, and that's absolutely fine.
But I think whilst you guys were talking a lot, I was just sort of listening and taking it in, and where I keep on coming back to is, wouldn't it be great if you could rely on everyone being honest? Wouldn't it be great if when you ask, well, what do you guys want? You only got that inner emotion of what they really think and feel, because that's the position I think we're always in as leaders within organizations, is you always have the best intentions all of the time. I would argue that that probably is the same for every manager and anyone in any organization. It's always best intentions. But then when you ask questions, people don't speak up, people don't take it on their own responsibility. And when you talk about well-being, if you understood that, actually, that is your responsibility. It is your responsibility, if you're not in a great space, to talk about it, because the moment you're not in a great space, it does affect your work. It's not an if, it does. So if you've not had a good time at home and you're coming into work, make sure you're talking about it. You know, take the morning off or whatever is required to get that under control, because by coming in, you just, you know, the amount of risk that you bring with you is just immense. You know, you might talk to someone in a bad way and they've had a bad time, and then the cascade effect of what that does, it's just vast. And just getting the, you know, people to a space where they do take that responsibility and understand that actually being in a great space every day, that is my responsibility. And if I'm not, I understand it's my responsibility to talk about it. Of course, that relies on having organizations that want to do something about that. But I think most organizations have been in that space for a very long time. It's just, I think the approach we take as organizations has always been a very broad stroke. You know, it's just going, well, let's try this. And then you deploy that. But actually, where the most focus, where it probably always needed to be, is just encouraging people to be blooming honest.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, I think the theme of today should be honesty.
It's so sad, isn't it? Because I would argue organizations have always been interested in making sure people are able to perform, and have been troubleshooting that for a long time. And if we'd all believed that honesty is the most important thing in our environments, yes, it may not have always been well received, I get that. But if we owed it to ourselves that we can't exist in environments where that's not embraced, well, then that would be the difference, I think.
Yeah.
Right?
Absolutely. And sometimes a message is hard to give because it is, you are being honest, and it might not be the the message that person wants to receive, but that's the only way you're going to improve. You know, sometimes we have to give the hard messages to a line manager or to a team member, but once you've had that, you often find they feel better for receiving it, and then they can go forward and perhaps improve on it next time and be a better employee, better line manager, whatever it may be. So honesty is definitely the right policy. It must just be given in perhaps a constructive manner and making sure it's done in a certain way.
Well, yeah, I think it is always one of the biggest explorations I've certainly done in my life. And constant. I'd say it's constant. I never get perfect at being honest, because you always think, will that hurt someone's feelings? Will that do? But the way I get beyond that is always aligning it to what we're trying to achieve in whatever environment I'm in. You know, do we all believe in this? If so, surely me just going, that's what I see, that's where we need to improve. Maybe that helps people embrace that honesty to some extent. I don't know.
Hopefully.
Yeah, exactly. That's all you can do. I think the beautiful thing about the space of people and doing that, I don't think there ever will be the right solution for all. I think there's a basic framework, certainly in all the work we do, where you know there is a lot of focus on honesty quite clearly, but it's never going to be something you can say with 100% it's absolutely the right way, because with people, you just don't know. I suppose that's the challenge you'll always face in HR, right, Kelly?
Absolutely. One approach doesn't fit all, and you've got to find a way of understanding what each individual needs. We have staff who want an arm around the shoulder and they want a more caring, softer approach. And then we also have staff that just giving it firm and telling them straight, and then they take it on board and off you go. But if you tried to give the straight down the line guy a hug and a softer approach, he'd look at you and go, well, probably give you a mouthful, to be honest. He was like, get your hands off me, what the hell are you doing? But equally, if you gave a mouthful to the softer approach guy, that would totally go against what would get the best out of him. So it's our roles as HR, as line managers, as businesses, of knowing what each individual employees need and what's best for them to perform, and adapting our approach to get the best out of them.
And having a general framework around that, you know, there always has to be a general approach, right? Because otherwise,
it has to be, yeah, and then you just tweak it.
Yeah. All right.
I think we've talked today about managers a lot, and that's sort of top down, that's there. But is there a thing around cultures where people give each other constructive criticism or praise people, creating better conversations generally with your colleagues, you know, people in the team at the same level as you? Is there something in that?
I think honestly, when you guys were talking about honesty before, I think when you talk about honesty, it's not just being about honest, it's about being ready to accept honesty. And I think that's where people struggle, because it's really difficult to kind of listen to someone, maybe talking about you in a what you would deem as a critical way, not to be defensive. But I think that's where you establish what honesty is. And, you know, if you say we're going to have an honest organization, that can't just be one or two people saying, here's how it is. It's got to involve everyone. And I think if you do that right, then receiving honesty and receiving, you know, those what could be deemed as criticisms or suggestions or whatever, I think people become a little bit less defensive, because they know that that's their organization, that's the environment that they're in. And as long as they understand, as Oliver said, that, you know, that's what we're trying to achieve, and you get people on that journey with you. There's like Kelly alluded to, there's sometimes a right way, not a right way and a wrong way, but a different style of delivering that honesty. And if you know that person, you know they like the arm around them, or they like that, you can just tell them how it is and they're fine with it. But I think establishing that in organizations is really key, and because I think honesty is probably at the heart of all the cultures, whether the cultures are great or not so great, and how honesty is perceived and how it's kind of managed, I guess. I suppose that's where the manager's role comes in. And I think it's great that Kelly knows, you know, the people in our organization well enough to kind of know which personalities like the arm around the shoulder or like to be told it straight. But obviously in massive organizations, that's going to be a lot harder. And I think one of the ways you overcome that is just to establish that honesty. Honesty isn't just about your line manager telling you off or the line manager telling you how it's going to be. It's about you being honest back. So that's a two-way thing. So I think then once you can start to be honest, receiving honesty becomes less defensive, it becomes less problematic.
Absolutely, and I think, Rory, your point of, does it have to be top down or can it be bottom up? I think communication and praise and feedback can be in all directions. You know, we have a shout about us incentive. That's, if somebody's done a good job, let us know and we'll shout about it, because here in the head office, we may not necessarily hear about things that happen on the ground in the different depots or on sites. And there's nothing more satisfying than just telling somebody they've done a good job. That makes you feel great and it makes them feel great. And if we can do that in every single day of our lives, just telling somebody how great they've done or thank you for that piece of work, the knock-on effect, it passes on, doesn't it? They then might be nice to somebody else, and then that goes down the line. So absolutely, it's not just an up and down. I think it's a cross section up and down in every which way you can. Celebrating when people have done a good job, but also being able to give that, oh, actually, mate, I would have done it a different way there. You know, this is how we usually do it, just for next time. I think people need to feel empowered to be able to give that feedback and that message, even if it's not necessarily a good one, you know, a nice one.
Yeah.
Rory, you might not have visibility of these. I've had a few questions through.
Okay, great stuff.
I noticed that it's 9 minutes left, but yes, I loved what Kelly was saying there about wanting the environments to be exactly that way, where there is a sort of freedom of thought and speech that we know is very complex to get into environments, but ultimately, I think if you do have champions within organizations, it's got a hope, hasn't it? And it's just difficult. How do you promote that? How do you get that going through? But I guess that's part of that earlier reaction I had to thinking about how do you get the environments to the right place to really face the challenge of Great Resignation and what that really is. It is really a journey. You know, it's not just a quick turnkey solution and it's done. It's organization wide, isn't it? And those are huge challenges. We've all faced them for long enough. And you, like I said, that millennial challenge was probably the beginning point where companies started understanding the importance of culture, you know, having a little bit underneath that wasn't just about fulfilling a role. It was about more. But yeah, sorry, I was just sort of responding to what.
Oh, absolutely. I think in the interest of honesty, I haven't seen those questions, Oliver. So if you could essentially read those out, that'd be fantastic.
Russell is summarized, really was looking at, well, you know, organizations historically have exactly, you know, and people have had a job for life. And there was a view around that, where Russell sort of suggests that things might be, there are sometimes companies out there that seem to almost issue golden handcuffs to make it much harder for people to take information with them, take the experience and everything they've learned in an environment onto another environment and benefit those environments. And I suppose Russell's just looking, well, does that have a role to play in any of this? You know, preventing the Great Resignation, putting more barriers in front of people to stop them leaving. Is that something that anyone's experienced, I suppose, or has an opinion about?
I think personally, if somebody wants to leave your business, then are they the type of person you want in your business if they're wanting to leave, if that makes sense? You know, if they are headset on leaving and they don't want to be doing their best for your business anymore, although you might have your restricted covenants or whatnot, or, you know, really tight ironclad contract, do you really want that person in your business if they're going to be a negative influence, if they're not going to motivate the team, and if they're not going to do their utmost to benefit the business that you're in? Once they've got in their head that they're wanting to leave, I think what I've seen is people tend to then they're not a part of the team anymore. They're already gone, even though they might physically be sat with you. So although you might have really tight restricted covenants and they can't, go to some, a direct competition or anything like that, I guess it's weighing up actually what is the risk of that person, what could they take with them or whatever, versus do we just need to get them out of the business as soon as possible because we're paying them to sit here and they're probably not going to be doing the best for us.
Yeah, exactly, Kelly. And I think I would add to that and say maybe have exit strategies for this. So rather than trying to fight it, like you say, and say, well, you're not going, you've got 2 years with us, or making it difficult and just having that conflict, maybe have something in place where you've got exit strategies. So people, if they do say I'm moving on or whatever, then you can actually gain something from that. Maybe we'll find out why they're leaving and use that information to strengthen the next candidate that comes through. And just kind of accept that people are going to leave, and for whatever reasons, there's going to be a multitude of reasons people will leave, but maybe just having those strategies in place rather than trying to sort of bury your head in the sand with it and go, well, you can't leave, we've invested lots in you. Yeah, it's probably going to happen. And like you say, if someone doesn't want to be around, are they the right people to have there anyway?
Absolutely. And I guess common sense prevails. If somebody's going to be resigning to go to a competitor or anything like that, they're going to take everything they're going to want before they hand the notice in. So you telling them they need to go on gardening leave for 3 months or whatever, forcing them to stay in the business, they've got it in the head, whatever. There's not a great deal you can do to actually stop that.
Yeah. And Russell's question was aligned to graduates coming in. And I suppose the only thing that you apply maybe, I was going to say differently, but I don't think you would do it differently. But maybe one of the biggest focuses needs to be on why this environment, why this organization, why, are you aligned to what we're trying to achieve? Do you truly believe in that? Are you truly bought in? Because it's so easy, isn't it? We all remember when we were studying and you're sort of learning maybe a vocation or a specialist area that you think, actually, I can make some money that way. So effectively, you're just looking for your first employment anyway. And that can be very fickle as a relationship because you just want to get a bit of experience under your belt just to go to somewhere else. So any organization will take me, well, I'm in. So maybe a little bit of a heavier focus about, well, this is why we're doing it. Do you truly believe in that? Are you inspired by what we do? And maybe a bit more of a heavy focus on that side of things rather than the abilities, because let's face it, with graduates and lots of the vocational training out there are lots of people going through that. And yeah, maybe there just needs to be more of a focus on the onboarding process in really understanding that, well, what makes us such a special place to work in, right?
Absolutely. A job has to be right for the individual, and the company has to be right for that individual. I think it's definitely a two-way street, and I think sometimes we don't put as much emphasis on that as we should. We ask the candidate a whole host of questions in an interview, but very rarely do we get many questions back on what's the culture, what drives the business. We don't get any questions back, and I think candidates need to be a little bit more savvy in working out, is that company right for them, as well as are you right for us?
Yeah. And there was, sorry, did anyone else want to?
Sorry, I'm just conscious we've got a couple of minutes left. Are there any more questions?
There is another question. It's on LinkedIn. I've had a quick read through it, and I think we've touched on a lot of the topics. Just summarizing, do you think the right way to approach this is through raising wages? And I think, Kelly, you covered that off very nicely earlier on. It was quite clear you could chuck a lot of money at that, but ultimately you'll end up losing.
Yeah.
As a company, how one should react, people leaving in 5 to 6 months, it's the higher turnover. And I think we've just covered that off a little just with thinking about graduates. And was there a work-life balance before COVID? That's a good question. We've only got 2 minutes, so I'd say probably not something to cover off, but we can address it LinkedIn. Possible loss to company. What's it going to look like in the future? Again, that might be a little.
If I knew that, I'd put the lottery on it.
But yeah, that's all the questions I had there, Rory.
Excellent. I think that's been a great discussion, and I think we're going to have to end it there. We did say we do an hour. So if people do have any questions, please do feel free to contact Oliver or Dan, and possibly Kelly via Ollie and Dan. I'm not sure if you're open to that.
Yeah.
Yeah, great stuff. Thank you. If you just visit the Tribe365 website, which is tribe365.co, you'll find contact details there. So thank you very much for joining us. It's been fantastic, and thank you very much to the panelists. It's been a fantastic discussion. Thank you, and goodbye. I think it is.
Goodbye.